I'm just going to talk about why I love horses so much. It's mainly because horses are a bit easier to understand for me than people are. So for me, they're a lot more relatable, and in terms of their ways of communication, for me, they're just easier. They're also often misunderstood creatures. They're often treated badly, and there's more research now going into how they feel and their emotions and their complex social structures and how their herd works. But for a long time, they were treated pretty poorly. They process emotions differently, and all of them are slightly different, so you have to really know the individual when working with them. They can also be very sensitive. Some don't like being touched, some will react when you react in a certain way. Movement can be very stimulating for them. It was quite comforting for me to be around beings that were kind of at the same level of sensitivity as I was. Once you gain their trust, they're there for you, pretty much. There is a high variance of individuality and personality. A lot of them are either introverts, or where they'll just keep to themselves, or they'll be a bit aloof from the rest of the group. And then you have the extroverts who love being part of everything and love being in your space and love being near you all the time. They also don't hide things, and they actually react to people that do. So if you're someone that is hiding an emotion or thought or feeling, they'll actually react negatively towards it, which can be very enlightening in your emotional state. Some of them actually use coping mechanisms through pattern and repetition. So one horse that I'm working with at the moment, his name's Merlot, he gets very stressed and he's highly sensitive. So when I brush him, I have to do it in steps, and I can't brush him all at once because it's too much for him. And I know when he's stressed about it because he'll go around in circles. That's his way of showing and telling me that he's a bit stressed and he needs some time out. Some of the things I've learned about horses are identifying non-verbal cues. When you don't have the verbal input, it's much easier to decode information based on how they're interacting with you. So, for example, if a horse pushes on you, that's giving you a clear sign that something's wrong, whether they want something from you or they're uncomfortable. Whereas with humans, when you've got the speaking and then the facial expressions and then the body language, it can be a bit much to decode all at once. It also allows us to reflect about the thoughts of the horse when you're socializing with them, because if you don't understand the perspective of the horse, then it's very difficult to know how to work with them. So it really does force you to consider, well, if I do this, how will this affect the emotional behavior of the horse? If I push them too hard today, maybe that will get them upset. Or I know that the horse kicks when it's triggered by a certain event or action. As well as trialing certain things. So I did this action and the horse reacted negatively to it, I wonder why. Or maybe there's something a horse really likes. And it also teaches you how to communicate effectively. Learning how do I get my attention across? How do I communicate what I need? Because sometimes it can be really hard. I do a lot of liberty work, which means you have no reins, nothing. You're on the ground with the horse. So what my mentor would do with me is say, okay, try and get them to come to you. And just walk off. Like if they wanted to, there'd be no reason for them to come up to me. So I'd have to make my intentions clear and say, hey, I'm a cool person to hang out with, come hang out with me. Sometimes it's very hard because you just go, oh, there's this blade of grass over there, much more interesting. And it also transforms a sensitivity into a strength. A lot of Aspie struggle with emotional regulation and empathy. A lot of us feel deeply, but when it comes to horses, that's a good thing because they're also the same. So if you're aware of yourself, that you're more likely to accept it in other beings like that. And as well as building trust. So how do I convey that I'm not a predator, for example? I don't want to hurt them, especially for horses that have been hurt before. And it can require a lot of work depending on the horse. There's not one formula that you can use to help bond with the horse. Also learning boundaries, how to establish it with different types of people. For example, a dominant horse, for example, might push on you a lot and invade your personal space. And then it enlightens you, do I let other people do that in my life? So how can I push them out of the space and tell them, no, that's my personal space. This is what I need. Which is, again, they physically show you, so it's much easier to identify. Meditation, especially when you share it with animals, can create a huge bonding environment because you can teach an animal to be peaceful. They're going to associate with that feeling. So they're more likely to trust you in the future if you've shown that you can maintain a level of peace and understanding. It doesn't always require much tactile input either, like, especially if you have tactile sensitivities, it can be much easier to do it with a horse in particular, because a lot of them are sensitive themselves to touch. And you can pretty much do meditation, for example, anywhere. Like, you can sit down on the bus and start meditating if you want. Some things you can do is keeping your body still, focusing on one particular sound. So, in this room, for example, I can focus on the sound in the audience. I can focus on the clothes touching my skin, and learning how to respond to the world around you, keeping present and identifying when you overthink, and dealing with anxiety and things. Overthinking was a big part of my life, but when I was able to identify why I started overthinking, the thoughts and thinking became different. So I was able to more reflect on myself and then remove the busyness of thinking itself. It's really been quite powerful for me, and I found it really enlightening on myself, being around beings like that and being able to bring your mind down to a place of calm. It's been really great. So thank you for having me.
I have a couple of questions. First, you touched on social patterns that horses have. What kind of social patterns are they? How do they communicate with other horses and such?
So horses are actually, a lot of what they do is powered by intention. So with their social patterns, there's often a main dominant horse that kind of directs the group. So let's say in a wild herd, you have a stallion who's like the lead stallion who sort of directs them to places to graze, and then you have the lead mare as well, and she's sort of the one that keeps everyone else in line. But then you also have these horses that are not so much focused on dominating as to actually being innovative, finding new areas to graze. Often the horses that are actually leaders, they're the ones that are really good in times of danger or novelty. So usually when a dominant stallion or dominant mare or something, when they're in a novel situation, they'll just freak out and they'll lash out at the others. Whereas the leader goes, okay, how about we try this? And so they're more likely to lead in. Then you have this sort of the ones that are lower down in the hierarchy that are pretty much happy to be bossed around. Depending on the herd structure, you can have some that are very similar in personality, and it's very interesting seeing them clash. And often, they communicate a lot through movement. So, for example, if a horse walks up to another horse and is pushing on their space, they're pretty much saying, "Get out of my space." A lot of the submissive horses will step back. So, one of the things I learned, because I wasn't very good with dealing with people in my space, and instinctively I stepped back. Now that's saying you're able to invade my personal space because I stepped back. Now what I do is, if a horse is particularly dominant and used to bossing people around, I just stand there or I step away, because then I'm communicating to them, you cannot invade my space. If you want to interact with me, it has to be on terms that I'm comfortable with. So a lot of it's kind of a push and pull thing. So if I move into your space, I'm communicating to you that I want something. So a lot of dominant, they'll just move them around. So they'll just go up to them and move behind them, or they want a particular area to graze, they'll move towards them. So it's pretty interesting seeing there's a lot of new research coming out now that's kind of getting rid of the idea that there's only one dominant mare or one dominant stallion. And yeah, it's quite interesting because it can be very enlightening with humans, because there are these complex social dynamics, but when you can actually observe it and put on your, scientific lens and watch it in horses, it makes it much easier to identify in people.
You talk about horses like they're autistic. Do you feel that they have autism?
Yes. A lot of them I feel do. There's one particular one that she has her days where she's okay, but then other days she's like, no, I'm over people. She's usually the one that's away from all the other horses. So the other horses who are very social, they're like all mingling. She's always the one away from them. The one I work with, Mello, he's very anxious, so he has anxiety problems. So for him, when things get too much for him, he just moves and he paces, and so he'll literally he'll get into a point where sometimes he doesn't even register me there, so he'll just keep on circling, okay, let's stop and then think back and let's focus again. And tactile input for him is a lot of information, so it's quite interesting seeing how much I have in common with them.
So how long have you been involved with the horses?
I started RDA, so Riding with the Disabled, when I was 10.
Yeah.
And then I met my current mentors in 2016. I started doing a lot more of the sort of equine facilitated learning type programs. I'm currently doing a mentorship program, so I can hopefully help others as well with that. There's a lot more sort of research coming out, is using them to help particularly autistic people learn social dynamics.
Yeah.
I would love to train them. I've been actually told by someone that I actually once knew how to. There was a horse that got really upset over a novel situation, so another horse had been taken away from him, and he got really upset and he was going to flee, and I just used my ability of circle, so I just put him in a circle and went, okay, come on, let's just, and I started visualizing, because I have a very visual mind. I said, okay, your partner's in the paddock, it's fine. And then whenever I could feel him tensing, I just used repetition with him, and for him that helped him get back into a place where he could think again. When horses get into that heightened state, it's often very hard to get them down, so sometimes not. I would love to have my own horse one day and train them, and maybe even have a foal or something, you know. It'd be so nice. I just love horses. I'll probably be that person who has 30 horses on a paddock by myself and be perfectly happy.
Do you actually work with race horses like gallopers and trotters, or do you just work with the horses that they just stay in the paddocks?
Mainly paddock horses. I do work with some rescue horses that used to be racers. So often with them, they've got a higher energy, so it can get quite interesting knowing how to sort of get their mind down a bit. Because they're often very energetic.
Well, that was really, really great. Can we have another round of applause?